We do begin tonight with the new images now emerging of that horrific explosive crash, a UPS cargo jet seconds after takeoff from Louisville, Kentucky. At least 12 people killed, including all 3 on board, 9 people on the ground.
Investigators say the cargo jet, fully loaded with fuel, managed to clear the fence at the end of the runway, but quickly banked to the right and slammed to the ground, hitting several businesses.
The website FlightAware also says that this specific plane was grounded for over a month recently, likely for maintenance.
Well, we've got a major update on UPS 2976, the crash out of Louisville, Kentucky, of that MD-11. And there's been some numerous news reports about it. The NTSB has reported. We've got new video for you, and I'm going to tell you why this aircraft didn't climb. And there's a video I'm going to show you that's pretty definitive of why this airplane didn't fly. So for the last 48 hours, I've been scratching my head looking at the video over and over again. I've talked to dozens of commercial airline pilots and saying these airplanes are supposed to climb on 2 engines, even with a fire over on the left side. That video we saw just a couple of days ago. Why in the world did this airplane not climb out? Well, there's a real good reason why it didn't climb out. We'll show you what that reason is here in a minute. The NTSB just got in front of the camera, and they've got some of their initial discoveries or findings from the crash. One of the things that we showed you on the first video was we thought the left engine, the number 1 engine, had actually separated from the aircraft because we had a picture of it laying over on the side of the runway. And I think I told you on that last video, I wasn't definitive about that because you can Photoshop these things, and it hadn't been verified independently. Well, now it's been verified by all the major news agencies and the NTSB. They've actually retrieved the engine, and they've got it in a warehouse. One of the things that the NTSB does in their investigative process after the fact is they will actually collect every fragment of this airplane, and they will put the airplane completely back together in a huge warehouse. It's absolutely incredible the depth that they go into to get to exactly what happened in order to make sure that it never happens again, because our hearts are broken for these families. And you have to remember there's real people behind all of this. And as you're looking at these really horrific images of this tragic accident, there are real families attached to all that. So we want to be respectful to that process. And the NTSB is certainly respectful to that process as well. So let me recap where we are on UPS 2976, and then I'm going to tell you why that airplane never got airborne. We've got video for you, and it's pretty definitive as to why. But UPS 2976, Louisville, Kentucky to Honolulu, Hawaii. They're carrying about 220,000 pounds of fuel altogether. That's about 34,000 gallons of fuel. That's a lot of fuel. They're in their most critical phase of flight, the takeoff. I explained that on the last video. They're the heaviest they're ever going to be. They're most fueled up they're ever going to be. They've got the power all the way full forward, so they don't have a lot of reserve power to call on, and they're fully configured. The landing gear is down. All the flaps are down to initially get airborne. You see the airplane, I'll show you that video again, in super slow-mo this time. You see them initially try to get off the ground, but they limp and they don't quite get up in the air. I'll explain why that happened. But right at what's called V1, and V1 is a speed that the computer on the airplane actually calls out for us. It's one that we calculate ourselves as the pilots, but at V1, that's the go, no-go speed. In other words, you don't have enough runway left in front of you to reject the landing. That's the technical expression for it, to stop on the pavement in front of you. So once you hear V1, every commercial pilot is trained that you continue to fly. You keep the power full up and you roll until you can lift that airplane off the ground, and it might limp into the air, but it's going to fly and it's going to take off in the runway that you've got remaining. So you're not trained to reject the takeoff after V1. What we clearly know from this incident, since they go off the runway at 184 knots, is that they were past V1 because they do not attempt to reject the takeoff. If they'd gotten on the brakes and pulled the power back, they would have slowed down significantly. They would have hit the same buildings, but they would have been going slower. That's neither here nor there. They're not trained to do that. They're trained to take off in that scenario. So somewhere between V1 and rotate, they have this catastrophic failure of the number one engine. Now, the engine, as we know, separated from the aircraft, and the what we don't know is what happened to one of the other engines. And I'm going to explain that in a minute. The number one engine actually comes off the airplane. Now, there's a couple of reasons it could have come off. One is, in this aircraft design, the MD-11 and the DC-10, I flew the DC-10 for a long time. The DC-10 was notorious, and there was an accident back in the 70s where a pylon failed, and the pylon is that attachment to the wing on top of the engine. So you got the big engine underneath, you got the pylon on top, and it failed on a DC-10 back in the 70s. And I think we're going to do another video comparing these two in the future. But the engine actually came off the aircraft. Same sort of thing you see here. It wasn't on the ground. It was actually airborne. I think they were at about 500 feet. Now, one of the things that you're going to get out of this investigation is that the NTSB already said that the ADS-B data said the airplane got up to 400 feet. It did not get up to 400 feet. You can see that in the video. ADS-B data is notoriously way off when you're on the ground, right? Once it gets up to about 400 or 500 real feet, then it's really, really accurate up to that point. But when you're on the ground, it's not accurate. You can see from the videos that the airplane doesn't get more than about 50 feet total. Now, the nose of the aircraft might be at 150 feet, but the actual stuff that hit anything was down around 50 feet or so. So at any rate, the engine could have separated for any number of reasons. It could have been a catastrophic failure of the engine that caused the pylon to fail and the engine came off. Or it could have been the pylon failed, which caused a catastrophic failure of the engine. Either way, it could have happened. There's a lot of people that think it's most likely the pylon because they had pylon failures in the past with those airplanes. However, the pylon failures in the past were due to high lateral G factors on those pylons. In other words, the airplane got sideways with the airstream, and the G's on the side, pushing on the side of those pylons, caused the engine to come off. Right, this airplane, as I can see from the video, and you can see, it's going straight forward right down the runway. So I don't think it was a pylon failure. I think it was actually the engine that failed, and that engine, when it failed, caused the number 3 engine to fail. I'm going to show you a video here proving that in just a second. So that number 3 engine, which is the engine on the right wing, remember there's 3 engines on an MD-11. So the one on the left wing is number 1, the one on the tail is number 2, the one on the right wing is number 3. Let's take a look at the video now in question, and we're going to slow this thing down and we're going to isolate it because you're going to see something that's called a compressor stall on that number 3 engine. It's real quick. Remember Air India 171? And one of the theories that came out initially about the dual engine failure was it could have been a compressor stall. And I said there was no evidence of a compressor stall because you can see it, right? Little rings of fire will come out of the back of the engine if there's a compressor stall, and you hear it because the engine is real loud. It goes pop, 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 right? You can hear it for miles. There was nothing like that on Air India 171. Watch this now. This is the UPS 2976 rolling down the runway. Here they go. We're going to zoom in on them, and right there, I'm going to stop the video. See on the right side of the airplane, down low, you see that flame coming out? All right. That is characteristic of a compressor stall. So what that means is that engine is failing. Now, is it just coincidental that the number 3 engine is failing at the same time that the number 1 engine has departed the aircraft? No, I think it's a big stretch to say that that was a coincidence. I'm guessing that the number 1 engine, when it came apart, somehow did damage to the number 3 engine. I'll show you a schematic here in a minute that shows you how easy that is to happen. So I think the two are absolutely related. That big fireball you see in this picture over the left wing is fuel that's being pumped into an engine that's not there anymore. That engine is already separated from the aircraft, and that fuel is being pumped out. There's a fire started, and that big old fireball is because of that fuel. What's going on in the cockpit right now? What's happening is this. When they started their takeoff roll, they were clear for takeoff. Everything was normal. The next thing that the two pilots do, the pilot flying and the pilot monitoring, is they do an airspeed accuracy check at 80 knots. So the pilot monitoring will say 80 or 80 knots. And then the pilot flying will look down at their instrumentation and the other one, and they see 80. The airspeed is good. That's the first check. The next thing they're waiting for is for the computer generated voice to say V1. At that point, they're at the no-go spot on the runway. go, no-go spot on the runway, and they've got to now continue flying. They can't reject the aircraft with the runway remaining. Somewhere after V1 and somewhere between that and rotate, they had this catastrophic failure. And it could have been simultaneously with rotate, because the next thing after V1, the pilot flying is waiting for the pilot monitoring to say rotate. And that's a speed that's calculated for every single flight based on your gross weight, the length of the runway, density, altitude, a whole bunch of other things are factored in. He's going to say rotate. You can see this MD-11 is clearly trying to rotate. The nose is way up. And so the way we do it is you just gently pull back on the yoke. You get the nose wheel to come off the ground, and you set an attitude. You don't pull it off the ground, right? Because you'd strike the tail. So you just set an attitude just like they've got. That's a perfect climb out attitude right now in that airplane. Now you're going to let the thrust and the lift you up off, and you start climbing. Once you get up to 50 feet or 100 feet, you ask for the gear up, you clean up the airplane, you climb even more dramatically. These guys are attempting to get to that place, but something's wrong. They should be climbing out on 2 engines. The reason they're not climbing out, there's a compressor stall on the number 3 engine. They've only got 1 engine that's fully functioning for them. So how much thrust is coming out of that number 3 engine? It's reduced. That's all I know. The report in a month or at the end of the year will say exactly how much thrust was coming out or not coming out of that number 3 engine. But the investigators now going forward are going to concentrate on that number 3 engine. And part of our reporting here will help them focus in on the stuff they need to focus in on. Let me continue with the video. You're going to see a couple more little pops out of this engine. They're real quick, but it's characteristic of that compressor stall. It goes pop, 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 right? Watch it. Here it comes. All right, the flame goes out, but here it is. There's one, and there's another one. Those 2 little flames right there. Those are compressor stalls. Now you don't see any more coming out of it. It doesn't mean it's not stalling. The cameraman turns away. He comes back to the aircraft, and we see the fireball. I'm going to show you a different angle here now from a dash cam that really kind of explains much better and in much more detail what's going on, but I'll get to that in a minute. I want to show you a diagram of the engine and what happens with these engines. All right. So here's a diagram of the GE CF6 engine. That's the engine that's on the MD-11. I flew this engine for many years. It's the same engine that's on the 767. 23 and a half years of flying the 767. Very reliable engine. But a jet engine is a pretty simple beast. It's got a whole bunch of what's called blades, and they're compressor blades, if you will, lack for a different name for them. There's the fan in the front that's doing the bypass air around the engine, also throwing air into the main part of the jet. But all of those blades, they're razor sharp, and they start out big in the front, and they get smaller and smaller and smaller so that they compress the air. So they're taking the ambient air outside and they're compacting it. And then it gets back to the burner section where they introduce fuel, and they light that fuel with that compressed air, and you get all that thrust out of the back of the engine. But there are literally thousands of these razor sharp blades spinning at thousands of RPM. So in the N1 section, they're spinning at about 3,800 RPM. In the N2 section of the engine, they're spinning at about 11,000 RPM. If any one of those blades comes apart or departs what it's doing, and in this case, I think it's pretty clear that the number 1 engine totally came apart. So let's say there's hundreds or even thousands of blades now spewing out in all directions. It's like a 50 millimeter machine gun just going off, shooting into the other engine. Now, let me show you another schematic of the aircraft from above. And this diagram of the MD-11 doesn't give you the exact perspective, but those 2 engines, the one on the left side and the one on the right side, actually sit underneath the fuselage a little bit. So there's actually a direct line from one engine to the other. If you were to get down there and look at it from side to side, it's, you know, the fuselage bottom of the fuselage would be here, and the midline of the engine would be right about here. So as that engine that's spinning comes apart, those blades can go straight and hit the other engine. They can also hit the ground and ricochet up into the other engine. They're going so fast and they're so sharp, they could go right through the fuselage and into the other engine. I've flown 2, 3, and 4 engine aircraft. And in the 4 engine aircraft that I flew, the P3, there were accidents over the years where the number 2 engine on the left side actually destroyed the number 3 engine on the right side because of that exact same thing. The blades came apart. Some of them even went through the fuselage, kept going out the other side, and hit the other engine. That's the violence that they're flying. So it's like almost like a machine gun. So that is a possibility of what could have happened to cause the compressor stall on the right side. Again, the investigation is going to tell you definitively whether that's true or not. So, compressed air, we talked about that. Thousands of blades, we talked about that. All right, why did they crash? Why didn't they get into the air, and why did they crash? Let's take a look at this other angle, because I want to show you here something that is just shocking. I'm going to show you this first one in full speed, and this happens real quick. This is from a dash cam of a car. You're going to see a couple of flashes of light. I'll explain what that is. It's not the compressor stalling. All right, but watch this. It goes real fast. Boom. There it goes from left to right. Now, let's do that one in super slow-mo. And we're going to go frame by frame with this video because I want you to see everything that you need to see here on why this airplane crashed. They've still got the nose lifted up. They haven't raised the gear yet. They're too busy. What happened at the point of failure was that the master caution light in front of the pilot flying came on. It lights up. The bells went off in the airplane, and so every fire in the airplane is a bell. So you've got alarm bells going off. The screens in front of them are lit up with all of the malfunctions, and there are numerous ones. It's not just the engine failure. Every other system related to that engine lit up on that screen. All they know is that they hear something's going on. They can feel it in the aircraft. The co-pilot, the pilot monitoring, calls rotate. The pilot at the controls pulls the nose back. He's probably pushed those 3 power levers up for all they're worth as far as they can go. The number 1 engine's already separated from the aircraft. That would be devastating if you're flying the airplane, and he's got the nose off. And now the pilot at the controls is going, why won't this thing climb? Because he's in that attitude where it should be lifting off, and it's just not climbing. What he doesn't know is he's getting reduced thrust, and probably greatly reduced thrust, out of that number 3 engine, and the airplane isn't going to fly. These guys are true heroes. They're valiantly trying to get this aircraft up into the air and away from all of those buildings and those wires, but it just won't fly. It doesn't have enough lift because it doesn't have enough thrust. So let's go frame by frame through this, and I'll stop it in the middle to show you what you're looking at. Here it comes into the picture, and right here, I'm going to stop it. You see that first flash? All right. What you see behind it, all right, is that the number 1 engine is missing. It's just totally gone. Over on the right side, you see the engine, right? It's pretty clear to see it, but there's nothing on the left side. So it's already departed. It's way back off on the runway. You can't really see any flames coming out of that right engine, but that doesn't mean that the compressor isn't stalling. The compressor stall doesn't always have flames coming out of the back. The other one was pretty definitive that it was, but that engine is still stalling. It's going pop, 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 and it's the air compressor inside of it, the compression of the air inside of it getting backed up, and it's causing like a backfire in the engine. That first spark that you see right now, that's the first high tension wire that they hit. Let's continue on. Stop right there. You can definitely see in that frame right there, there's no left engine at all. They're starting to dip a little bit to the left. It's just subtle, but they're starting to turn a little bit to the left because they're getting a little bit of thrust out of that right side engine, nothing out of the left. And the pilot's probably got full rudder in, and the airplane's starting to go over at this point. All right, and you see it kind of go off the frame. You see another spark here in a second. It's probably more electrical wires, and the airplane finally goes out of frame as it crashes. There's another spark. It's another electrical wire, and it just descends into the buildings off of the frame. Very shocking to watch that happen, but you can tell a lot by looking at those 2 videos. The number 1 engine is absolutely separated. That happened somewhere between V1 and rotate. The NTSB said it got up to 400 feet. It didn't. You can see that from the picture right there. This is just seconds after